Hello and welcome back to In Conversation with the Royal Butler. Now, before I begin, can I just say a huge thank you to everybody who has subscribed, who has liked, commented. It's been absolutely amazing. I am doing my best to try to respond to all your wonderful comments, but as there's been so many, I do struggle a little bit, but I try to is it like or heart? Is it a heart you send? Just so you know that I am seeing them and I am doing my best to respond. And I love your ideas and suggestions, and I am listening, and I am going to work on some of the ideas that you've given me, including a visit to my home in Scotland, my little cottage in Scotland. A majority of you have asked to see this, and I'm going to make this one of the videos that I'll be showing in due course. So I am listening, and as I said, please keep commenting, keep liking, and please keep subscribing. And if you do subscribe, remember to set the little reminder so that you know when these videos go live. So I'd like today's conversation to be about my former boss, because I wouldn't have worked for the British royal family if it hadn't been for the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. They were my employers. They're the ones that gave me the opportunity to work for the British royal family, and of course, which then saw me not only look after the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh and other members of her family, but also the young Princes William and Harry. So a lot of you have asked how and why. Well, if you've watched the other conversation, you'll know exactly about the ambition of a youngster wanting to work for the royal family and how that came true. As far as actually getting the job with the Prince, that was quite interesting, because I actually applied a few times for a position to the Prince. Now, this is when I'm a young adult. I want to say I was probably in my 20s at this point. And as I'd done before, I thought I'll write a couple of letters and see if I get possibly an opportunity of getting a position within his household. Now, these positions are very rare. They're not the easiest positions to get working for a member of the royal family. And if you are lucky enough to get an interview, there's no guarantee that you're even going to get the job. So I did actually, as I said, wrote to the office a couple of times, or to the Prince a couple of times, and I got the standard response back thanking me for taking the time to write a letter. It's been passed on to the HR, I think it was HR department, and the senior butler, and unfortunately there's no position at this moment in time. But it didn't kind of dishearten me. I didn't suddenly think, oh well, that's it. In fact, if anything, it made me kind of think, well, at least they've responded. That's a positive. So I should always kind of keep is it the ear to the ground or to the wall, and just keep listening, keep a lookout for anything that I might hear about or see, any adverts or anything. So that was my idea, was just to kind of keep a lookout for if anything else came along. Now, as you'll remember from the other episode, I was actually originally working as a butler at Benald Lodge in Scotland, and this is when obviously the late Princess Diana of Wales had died, and I had this ambition it'd be great to look after her boys. And I think when I got the job at Woburn Abbey as a butler, to eventually as a butler to the present Duke and Duchess of Bedford, I decided that I really wanted this position. I really wanted the opportunity to work for the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. And I actually heard about the position through my late mother, who had seen an advert in a magazine, a very well-known magazine that goes out and about, I think it's once a week. And in this magazine, it actually said I think it actually did say a position within the royal household of the Prince of Wales. And I thought, what harm is there to have another go at sending another letter? So I wrote to the agent, actually it was advertising the job, and they arranged for me to go and be interviewed by them. And then they said, well, look, your background is fantastic. We like everything about what you've done. Even though I hadn't had a huge career at that point. I mean, I'd only worked at a house in Scotland and then Woburn Abbey for, at that point, about 4 years. But they said it was good enough to put me forward. So I was put forward, my name was put forward to Clarence House, and I think it was a few weeks when I got a letter in, asked me to go for an interview. And I remember this so well. I remember getting the train from, I think it was Flitwick, can't even say it now, to London. I can't remember what station I would have come into, but anyway, I got the train to London, and then I'd get a taxi from the train station to Clarence House or St James's Palace. I think it was St James's Palace where the very first interviews took place. And I remember being in that kind of frame of mind that I'd have a damn good go at it, but if I didn't get it, then that's how it's meant to be. So I went into this first interview, and I remember getting into St James's Palace, into this reception room, and I was waiting for probably 20-25 minutes. And the one thing I remember is kind of looking around this room, and I noticed there was light bulbs that hadn't been replaced. And I thought, this is good, because they obviously need a good butler here. You need somebody that can keep an eye on when they need light bulbs changing and those kind of things. So I remember kind of putting that at the back of my mind, thinking that's a good point. I can always make sure they're aware I'm very observant. And then I was taken to one of the meeting rooms. I think at this point, we might have gone into Clarence House, into one of the offices there. And I sat down with the head of HR, and I think there was another assistant head of HR, and we discussed my career, what I'd done, childhood, why I wanted this position, and it all went really well. I thought, that's great, interview's gone good. And then they said, we'll be in touch in due course, and they did actually mention, we'll probably arrange for you to meet either the butler or a house manager from Highgrove, which is where the position for a butler had been advertised. It was actually at Highgrove House, which is Prince Charles's country house. So off I go, kind of left it for a few days, didn't kind of think any more about it, and got the second interview. And I think it was it was in a couple of weeks, so it was probably about a month after the original interview. I went for that interview, and don't really want to bore you too much, but after that interview, there was a third interview, a fourth interview. The fifth interview, I actually came to Highgrove itself to actually meet the house manager of Highgrove, who gave me a tour, not around the private side, but through the kind of the staff side, if you like, and also to see what would be potentially my accommodation. And that all went really, really well. It was really good meeting, very positive. Got given this chap's personal number, so I thought, this is positive, this is really good. And then it was kind of left that they'll get in touch with me for the final interview. So it was the sixth interview, and this is over the period of around about 6 months. So this had gone on for quite a while. This process began in October, and it only kind of finished in the March. Anyway, the final interview was to be with the Prince of Wales, and I remember I didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks, and I got in touch and I said, I hope everything's okay. And they said, well, we're just trying to find somebody else that can go forward for the job with you, because obviously they like to have a few people to choose from. And I thought, okay, that's fine. I thought, it's interesting. I couldn't believe nobody else had either applied or been as successful to this point as I had been. So it seemed quite strange. But anyway, I ended up giving it a few days, and then I thought, do you know what? I can't just wait forever. This is my dream job, as some of you will remember from what I've said before. And I just wanted the opportunity. I knew if I could get in front of the Prince, I could convince him that I can do the job. So I remember kind of phoning back, and I actually said that I'm aware that this is obviously going to take time, but as it's been almost 6 months, I really need to kind of get on with my life, what I want to do. And with respect, and this is a huge gamble. I said, with respect, I'm happy to kind of just leave it if they can't find somebody else for me to kind of be put with. And quite soon after, I got a phone call back from Clarence House to say that the Prince had agreed to meet me on my own, just me, and not another person. And I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely gobsmacked. I was so excited to have this opportunity, but at the same time, I couldn't believe it, and I couldn't tell anyone because it was all confidential. I think I might have told the housekeeper who I worked with, because she had to obviously cover while I was away, but I didn't tell the family, I didn't tell anyone, and I was so nervous about this meeting because this was going to be the very first time that I would meet the Prince of Wales, and I knew there'd be one opportunity to get this right. So I knew I couldn't let it. Well, I thought, I can't let this fail. And I also remember the night before being extremely nervous. I was obviously picking out what to wear. I remember the suit. Funny enough, I only got rid of the suit a few years ago. I kept it for many years, but I remember picking the suit out, and it was a black suit. And it was a white shirt and probably a dark blue tie or something similar. So it was I almost wanted to kind of look like giving the butler image, if you like. I wanted to kind of show him that I looked the part. And anyway, that night, needless to say, I hardly slept. I was going over in my mind of what I was going to say, what was going to happen, what I was going to do. And then the following morning, got up, had my breakfast. I had everything planned. I knew what train to get, because obviously you can't be late when meeting a member of the British royal family. So I had everything planned, and I got my train on time. And I remember being in the train going up to London, and just as I said, to say I was nervous is not even close. I was absolutely petrified because, one, meeting somebody like this, and also not wanting to fail. I just didn't want this not to work. So anyway, get to London, got the taxi. I'm now used to this process because I've done it a few times before. Got the taxi over to Clarence House, and on the way, the taxi driver said, "Oh, what are you doing in London?" And I said, "Well, I'm actually about to have a meeting with the Prince of Wales." And the chap couldn't believe it. He said, "You're going to meet the Prince," and that did not help my nerves, because he's then saying, "What an amazing opportunity! You're going to go and meet the Prince of Wales." And I'm thinking, I'm already nervous at this point, but anyway. And as we're almost there, he actually said to me, "What is it? Why are you meeting the Prince?" And I said, "I've actually applied for a job as one of his butlers." And this chap said, "Well, I'm going to wish you all the luck, and I really hope you get it." And he dropped me off, and so I go over to, it was at St James's Palace, so he drops me off, and I go into the same area, the same reception area as I've done before. But what was different about this time, so with all the other interviews I had there, it was always the same rooms, but on this one, it was slightly different, because this time I was taken into the private side of Clarence House, and I was taken into an elevator or a lift, taken to a second floor, got out of the lift or the elevator, and then went through a security door into this butler's pantry with a kind of little sitting room. And the butler on that day asked me to have a seat, made me very welcome, very comfortable, offered me some tea or coffee. I think I asked for some water. And I'm sitting there, and he then said, try not to be too nervous about this, because even if you don't get the position, you'll get a little card to say, a little diary card to show that you win today and that you met the Prince. And so it was really quite sweet of him to say that. And so I think I probably waited for about 10, 15 minutes, something like that. And in this room, there was a painting, a portrait on the wall of the Prince. And I remember kind of just keep looking at this, thinking, pretty soon I'm going to be face to face with this very man. And again, nerves were I was just thinking, just don't suddenly faint or something silly, which I'd never done, but you never know. You suddenly start having all sorts of thoughts in your head as to what could go wrong. And anyway, before I know it, I could hear this bell ringing in the butler's pantry, this little chime bell, and that was the signal that it was time to go. And the butler came in and he said, "Are you ready?" And I said yes, and we stood up and we walked out of this little room into this beautiful corridor. And I remember this corridor and had all these family portraits of royals and beautiful china and furniture. It was just absolutely beautiful. But the corridor, and I know this corridor so well now, but back then it just seemed so huge, so long, it just seemed to go on for miles. And we walked across this corridor to rooms that were kind of diagonally across from where I was. And we walked in, and as we walked into the room, I remember the butler saying, "Your Highness, may I present Mr. Grant Harold?" And I just didn't know what to do. All the kind of planning and everything had kind of gone out my head. And I remember, the one thing I do remember was they advised me that you nod your head when you meet the prince. So I walked up to him, and when I was a few feet in front of him, I nodded my head, and he put his hand out, and I put my hand out, and we shook hands, and he said, welcome to my home. And I just didn't really know what to. I think I obviously said thank you, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. And he then said, "Oh, and this is Mrs. Packer Bowles, who was also there," and I knew who Camilla Packer Bowles was, obviously, and I remember bowing my head to her as well, which I've always jokingly said to people probably went down quite well, because I must have known that what was round the corner, the royal wedding round the corner. But at this point, there was no talk of that at all. It wasn't even, that was about another year down the line before even an engagement was announced. But anyway, the point was I did nod my head, and they then went to sit down, so I sat down, and there was quite a few people in the room. You had, there was some private secretaries, there was the butler, there was the house manager from Highgrove, there was myself, and obviously the Prince and the Duchess. And then I was offered some tea. And even though I work at Woburn Abbey, I'm a butler at Woburn Abbey, the head butler at Woburn Abbey, I do tea all the time, I serve tea to the guests. That's one of my duties as butler. And let's not forget, Woburn Abbey is technically the home of afternoon tea. So I knew this ritual so well. But once again, I'm kind of having a panic about having tea, because I thought, I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't want to pick the cup up wrong. I don't want to stir the tea wrong. So I've got all this is kind of going on in my head at the same time. But anyway, he very kindly offered me a cup of tea, and I had a cup of tea, and I think there was a couple of Dutchy biscuits. And then the conversation began. And he asked me a little bit about my background, as in, where did I grow up? Obviously from Scotland. He said, I can hear you've got a Scottish accent, which he thought was wonderful. He said, where did you grow up? What is your, what made you want to become a butler? So I kind of went through those ambitions, those dreams I've mentioned to all of you about, explained how it all happened at my time working in Scotland. I didn't mention too much about the documentary I watched about the royal family, but I did say I had an ambition from a very young age to work for the family. And he then asked about the career that I did just now. He also noted, which I haven't mentioned, I don't think I've mentioned in these conversations, but for a very short spell, I worked at a folk pack in Newton Moor. And a folk pack is where we built traditional cottages and kind of reinvented the old way of life from the 16, 17, 1800s. And those of you that watch Outlander would recognise this place where I used to work, because some of the buildings that I helped build are in Outlander, which is the TV series. So I told him about, obviously, these traditional skills that I'd learnt, and he loved that. In fact, he said, maybe when I haven't got you butler, and I can get you maybe helping with building old stone walls, or doing some traditional building crafts, because he loves that. And so he was absolutely fascinated that I could do that. And I was more than happy. Anything I could do to help, and I made that very clear. I would. And I remember him saying, "Why do you want to work for me? Why what he says it's why do you want to work for me? Is it?" He didn't say he wasn't kind of like you mad or something. He was kind of saying I think what he was saying to me, there's so many other opportunities and things that I could do. Why, for him, why there? And I said, because it is an absolute dream and ambition for me to have this opportunity to work for you and your family, and to look after you and to do the job as a butler. For me, it's the top job. So it'd be a real dream come true. I was very open, very honest, and he smiled and nodded his head. And at the end of the conversation, I'd finished my tea at this point, and I think some of the others had, some of the secretaries and that had possibly asked some questions and things as we went along. And the interview process probably was it was quite long. It was between half an hour and 40 minutes, thereabouts. So it was quite a long meeting. I might even have gone up to 45 minutes by the time we'd actually left. And I remember at the end of it, he stood up. So we all stood up at that point. And he said to me, well, we'll be in touch very soon, and let's see. And that was kind of how it was left. So it wasn't kind of given as a definite, yes, you got the job, but it was very much kind of left that, let's see what happens. And he smiled. I remember him smiling, and I remember thinking, is that a good thing? Is that a good thing he's smiling? And then we walked over to the door with the Duchess. I'm saying the Duchess, but obviously Mrs. Packer Bowles back then. And she said it was how lovely it was to have met me and to had this conversation. And the Prince once again also said, thank you so much for coming, and it's been, it was a pleasure to meet. And I think I was kind of left was, hopefully see you again. And again, for me, I'm clinging on to these things, hoping that these are really positive things that they're saying to me. And off I go. So I go home. I get my taxi. My taxi's waiting for me. There was no kind of after comment. I went back to the butlers. I should mention, I went back to the butlers' pantry, to the waiting room, just to get anything I'd left. And then basically, you then leave. The interview is over. And I knew that was it, done. There was going to be no more interviews. It was over. And I got into the car and the taxi and back to the station and back to Woburn. And that night at dinner, I remember being, sorry, not that night at dinner, it was the following day, I should say. But I remember that night and the following day just not knowing what to kind of make of it, or what to kind of do. You kind of think, well, that's it. There's nothing else I can do. It's in the hands of the gods. It's fate. So about 2 days later, I got a phone call in the afternoon. It was just about when I was due to go off duty, and it was Clarence House. It was the HR department to inform me that I'd been successful in the application as a butler to the Prince of Wales. And I was so excited. I couldn't take it in. I was so shocked at getting the opportunity. And then I couldn't quite register that I'd done it. I'd got the position. But I still couldn't tell anyone, because they actually said, wait until we send you the official documentation before you actually inform your employers. And it was again a day or two later when I got the actual documentation in, officially offering me the position within the household of the Prince of Wales. And then I had the really tricky job of telling my wonderful employers, who I absolutely adored, the Duke and Duchess of Bedford. I had to then sit down and tell them that I was going to leave to work for the Prince of Wales. And I think that's a conversation for another day, obviously my time with them, because I was so fortunate and lucky to work for that family, and I was absolutely devastated to tell them that I was going to leave. In fact, I remember crying when I was trying to tell them. Such a big deal, such a big thing to tell them that I'm leaving to go and become a butler for the Prince of Wales and his family. And I remember I left Woburn, it would have been around about Easter time, or just before Easter 2004, because I joined the household of the Prince of Wales round about just before Easter, because I was actually sent to Scotland for my first job, if you like. It was my first role, was looking after them in Scotland with the rest of the royal household, or his household. And I remember, kind of packing up and leaving Woburn and arriving at Highgrove, and just think this is going to be an amazing opportunity, and I'm going to make the most of this. And I did. There was 7 wonderful years of memories with them, and there's not one moment of it that I ever regretted. When I was sent to Scotland, I got the opportunity to thank the Prince for giving me the position, and I remember being in his study where I actually got to see him again, and I just said, thank you for this opportunity. And he was so glad that he had the opportunity to meet me and to see what I was like, and could see that I was really keen to be able to do this, and so he wanted to give me that opportunity. And I just felt so lucky. And I was in Scotland for a few weeks with him at that point, and it was absolutely magical. And that was the beginning of such an amazing time. And of course, from looking after the Prince, a year later became the Prince and the Duchess of Cornwall. And also along the way, especially in that first year, I got to know Princes William and Harry, and got to look after them. And of course, the future Duchess of Cambridge. So it really was an amazing time, and I'm just so grateful for the Prince giving me that opportunity. Because if you hadn't given me that opportunity, that audience with him, then none of it would have happened, and I certainly wouldn't be doing the things that I do today. So for that, I'm extremely grateful. I should mention, before I went to Scotland, I did actually have a few days actually getting to know Highgrove, which was going to be where I was going to be based. And for those of you that don't know Highgrove, it's well worth a visit. You can visit the gardens; they're absolutely beautiful, obviously when they're open. And I was so lucky to be based in that house and working, which is a very private, personal home for the Prince and the Duchess, and of course the family. And when I started, I was obviously given a tour of the private side, and very quickly you're kind of already learning almost from day one about the things they like, don't like, things to do, what you can do, what you can't do, the kind of rules. So you learn very quickly of how it all works. And I remember just especially at the end of the first day, kind of walking to my car, because at this point I was living off site, and I remember walking to my car kind of through part of the gardens and just thinking, this is a dream come true, an absolute dream come true, that this is now my base. And as I said, it was all thanks to that audience, that interview with the Prince of Wales and Mrs. Packer Bowles. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. It's really fun for me being able to kind of sit here and relive these memories and share them with you. And as I always say, please keep liking, subscribing, commenting. Let me know what you want to hear about. If there's things that maybe I've talked about and you want to know more on certain subjects, please let me know, because as I said, it's for me, this is such a joy being able to kind of sit here and reshare these experiences and memories with you, and getting to relive them as well, which is great fun. And I should quickly mention that during today's conversation, as always, I've had my dachshund Shumba. So if you've heard any funny kind of sounds, it's probably little Shumbi here, who, as I've mentioned before, he loves the camera, and whenever he knows that I'm doing any kind of filming, he likes to come and lie in my lap. So he's heard these stories probably 100 times before, but that's why he's allowed to have a sleep while I'm doing it. I don't mind. He can have a sleep. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in for this week's conversation with the Royal Butler. and I hope you've enjoyed it, and please stay safe, and I will see you next Friday at the same time for my next conversation. Thank you for watching.